Carlespie, McKinney.
When I was in the 8th and ninth grades, I attended a junior high school called Pelham in Detroit, located on Martin Luther King Boulevard at the corner of Rosa Parks Boulevard. And school was very easy for me. In fact, I was an A student. And in fact, the only other time I saw something other than an A was when I got a D in metal shop. But I enjoyed school so much. I enjoyed flirting and teasing with the girls, acting silly. And it took my homeroom teacher, Mr. Bibbs, to keep my head on straight. So graduated from the ninth grade in June of that year and was ready because I had been accepted to Cass Tech High School in September. Well, that summer, before going on to high school, 52 students from 3 different junior high schools in Detroit were selected to attend a special 8-week program at Cranbrook High School. The program was called Horizons. Later on, it morphed into Horizons Upward Bound. And so I was one of the 52. And so we spent July and August in Bloomfield Hills on Cranbrook High School complex. And it was beautiful. I mean, the trees, the grass, the beautiful flowers surrounding you. It was a stark contrast to the gritty and bland neighborhood that I grew up in. But for 8 weeks, we were exposed to advanced courses in science, advanced courses in math, advanced courses in English. And I enjoyed it. In fact, it was, I would say, 3-part studies and 1 part fun. And so at the end of the 8-week period, there was to be a big dinner held in the dining hall to celebrate the end of the program. But unbeknownst to us, 2 of the 52 students was going to receive a full 3-year academic scholarship to Cranbrook High School. Now, Cranbrook High School is the most prestigious private high school in Michigan and one of the top high schools in the nation. The first person to receive that scholarship was Larry Castle. He was my classmate. He was white, and he also was a student of Mr. Bibbs, our homeroom teacher. The other student was me. And believe it or not, I was surprised, but my surprise was somewhat muted. So September comes, and instead of going to Cass Tech High School, I was at Cranbrook High School and stayed in the dorm there. In fact, one nice thing about the dorm was only about 50 yards from the classroom. So imagine in winter, walking less than a half a block and you're right there in the building where the classes are. It became apparent though, almost instantly, I fell from being an A student to a B- student. I mean, most of the parents who sent their children in were wealthy, but they didn't buy their students, their sons into that course, that class. Those students were very, very intelligent. I held my own, but I was no longer the smartest kid in the room. And then about, again, 200 students in the high school there. And there were about 5 of us who were Black. So I had to make some adjustments going to Cranbrook. First of all, we wore a uniform, a blue blazer, tie, white shirt, slacks. And there were no girls. I mean, for 3 years, I never saw a single girl. In fact, the cheerleaders were boys. Now, there was an all-girls school about a half mile away called Kingswood, but they never mixed the classes. We never saw them and they never saw us. But part of the big adjustment too had to do with music. I'm 14, well, about 15 years old now, and music still was very important to me. I did not like the Beatles. I want to hear Smokey and the Miracles or the Temptations. I did not like the Rolling Stones. I want to hear the Impressions. I did not like the Monkees. I want to hear Aretha Franklin. But the R&B stations in Detroit did not have a strong enough signal to reach Bloomfield Hills. So that was an adjustment for me, believe it or not. But again, some of the other things I learned how to properly use a knife and fork at the dinner table, both the English way and the American way. And in fact, something you don't see, I haven't seen it since I left Cranbrook. Haven't seen it since. Occasionally in a dining hall, the wives of some of the instructors would join us for dinner. And the protocol was whenever a woman came to the table to have dinner with us, we all stood up, all the boys. And she would sit down and eat with us. And if she got up before we did, we would rise when she rose. And then she would go on her way and we'd sit back down. I've never seen that since then. But in terms of other factors about Cranbrook, I was not a fish out of water. I was like a fish that came from a pond into a river. Everything culturally about Cranbrook was white, not black. But I never experienced any overt racism at all. I was well received. There was no one who was aloof or distant. I never encountered anything ugly like that. But I was in it, but I didn't feel of it. The purpose of Cranbrook, though, keeping that in mind, is to prepare its students, not just for college, but for some of the best colleges. That was Cranbrook's entire focus. So Cranbrook spent thousands of dollars on me, preparing me for college. I had private benefactors who provided resources for me. Everything was geared toward preparing me and all the other students for college. So 3 years later, I'm graduating, and there were 71 of us in the graduating class, about 3 blacks. At that point, I stepped on my own face. I kicked myself in the teeth. I betrayed my instructors. I betrayed my private benefactors. I betrayed Cranbrook itself. I decided very deliberately not to go to college. Not to U of M, not to Yale, not to Dartmouth, or any other college that had accepted me. I betrayed the trust that I would do the right thing. I betrayed the trust that I would do what was expected, to what I had agreed to by implication. I betrayed. But worse than deciding not to go to college was the reason why. I had already been part of a cult, and by the time I graduated, I had fully committed myself to the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, in those days, I don't know what it's like now, but Jehovah's Witnesses did not believe in a higher education for a couple of reasons. One is that they believed that going to college would result in you becoming a non-believer. But the most important thing is that the main mission in life should be to preach the good news of God's kingdom, so that when Christ came and fought the battle of Armageddon and destroyed all the wicked people, we would be the survivors. And so what do you need a college education for? So I decided to spend my life, in part, preaching the good news of God's kingdom. But in the meantime, I had to get a job. So I found the job at General Motors headquarters as a mail clerk, sorting and delivering mail to all the various offices in the GM headquarters, which at that time was in the West Grand Boulevard. With all that high-powered education, expensive education, I'm pushing a cart full of mail to deliver to different offices because I thought I was on a higher mission than going to college. Looking back, I'm so glad that no one from Cranbrook saw me sorting mail as opposed to prepping for an exam, or saw me pushing a mail cart as opposed to sitting in a lecture hall. But I eventually abandoned the cult. But I never told those I betrayed of my subsequent accomplishments, even though I had visited the scene of my betrayal several times. You see, after I abandoned, in fact, shortly before I abandoned the cult, I went to college. I started out at a community college and earned an Associate of Science degree in accounting with a 4.0. I parlayed that 4.0 into a scholarship, academic scholarship to Wayne State, and earned a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration, concentrating in finance and business economics. I graduated with high distinction, which is equivalent to summa cum laude. And from there, I got a master's degree in MBA. And then I got another master's degree in MSA, a Master of Science in Accounting. So in one sense, I undid half of my betrayal, but I never spoke to those I betrayed to let them know about my subsequent achievements. In fact, to my knowledge, all of them are dead except one, Mr. Delvin Walden, my favorite instructor at Cranbrook. Hands down, he was in charge of the dorm which I stayed. He was a football coach. He was my math teacher. No kinder soul there was on the planet as far as I'm concerned. And I have not been able to reach Mr. Walden. But if I had the chance to speak to him, I would say that I want to acknowledge my betrayal and the hurt you must have felt. I had to go on a path that led to a dead end before I found my way. For that, I'm profoundly sorry. I have borne the cost of my betrayal, and so have you and others. But I appreciate what you have done, even though I did not at the time that you were at my side. And so, Mr. Walden, I ask or say two things. One, please forgive my betrayal. And two, thank you.
And thank you, Carlespie.